Hey, yo, what's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is Smart TCG, and today I'm going to be going over my updated tier list heading into the Portland Regional Championships. January is going to be a very busy month as there's going to be tournaments like Portland, Liverpool, and Charlotte, along with also lots of local league challenges, league cups, and just Pokemon tournaments in general that people are wanting to prepare for. So today we're going to be going over my updated tier list with San Antonio Regionals. Recently we saw Charizard EX take that tournament down, so it'll be important to kind of understand exactly where the metagame is heading. But with that being said, if you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let's hop right into it. So we're going to start off with the deck that just most recently won San Antonio Regionals, which is going to be Arvin Charizard. So Azul GG most recently won San Antonio Regionals, one of the biggest events ever, and really solidified Charizard as one of the best decks, if not the best deck in the format. Charizard is really powerful as of right now. It's just a fundamentally broken deck. You have incredible cards like Arvin and Pidgeot, which are great support cards to be able to make sure that you're able to get Charizard after Charizard. It's a really good deck in general. However, I don't necessarily think it's a tier S deck as of right now. It has some problems, I think. I think that the Tina matchup is relatively difficult for this deck, along with the Gardevoir matchup, and I think people are going to kind of catch on to that, and they're going to start playing those decks at higher counts heading into Portland. We just saw at San Antonio Regionals, Tina get second place, but if you actually watch that game, Grant Hayes did lose that match, not actually to really losing the game on board state, but losing the game to prizes due to the time rules that went into like effect at that situation in Top Cut. So, Grant could have definitely won that game. And I think that some people aren't going to pay attention to that, and they're just going to see, oh, Charizard won the tournament, and a lot of people are just going to full send Charizard. Heading into a format with a ton of Giratina and expected a rise of Gardevoir, that's a little bit risky. I think the deck is incredibly powerful. However, I think it makes a little bit more of a risky play. However, if it's the only deck that you're considering for the tournament, totally fine. It's a great deck, can beat pretty much anything in the format, but I do think San Antonio was really where it peaked. It's still going to be a tier 1 deck for right now. It's a great deck, and I really can't put it any lower. Anyways, moving on here, let's move on to some of the other top decks. Let's go Giratina. I'm going to put Giratina ahead of Charizard. Giratina is incredibly powerful as of right now. It got second place along with also top 8, so it did very well at San Antonio. It takes a decent Charizard matchup as well. I would say it's favored for Giratina, and also this deck just pretty much can beat anything in the format. It really is the ultimate 50-50 deck. It doesn't really take a bad matchup to any of the top decks, which is really what makes it so special as of right now. Really, the only thing holding this deck back from tier S is going to be its consistency problems. It sometimes runs into consistency issues where it doesn't set up as it should. However, when the deck sets up, it's pretty difficult to beat. It's a great deck. I think it deserves a spot in tier 1. Moving into Gardevoir here, we're going to put Gardevoir here at tier 1. Gardevoir is still a fantastic deck, can pretty much beat almost anything, but one of the things that holds the deck back is you're almost playing 2 games at once. And you might be wondering, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that the deck is incredibly slow at times, which means that you're going to be fighting the clock as well in a best of 3 50-minute tournament setting that our regionals are held in. You can sometimes run into problems because if you lose a long game 1, you're probably not finishing the set and you're going to be tying. So this deck has a major tie risk due to how slow it can be. So you're oftentimes fighting the time. I think that if games were unlimited time, this would probably be undoubtedly the best deck in the format. However, it does run into some time problems, but it's still really good. I think with Charizard as well, seeing so much success, Charizard's going to go up in popularity as well, which I think makes Gardevoir a significantly better play for this tournament. I also think some of its harder matchups like Miraidon are going to go a little bit down in popularity just because Miraidon struggles to Charizard, in my opinion. So people are going to be, I think, a little bit afraid of that, and people are going to potentially put away Miraidon, and that makes Gardevoir even better. Because if they do hit turn 1 hands on you, it can be pretty difficult. Or if they hit hands before you Mirage Step. But anyways, Gardevoir, tier 1 deck, very good. I think it deserves a spot there. Speaking of Miraidon, I think Miraidon's a tier 1.5 deck as of right now. It's very good. However, its Zard matchup is really difficult to beat. Its Tina matchup is close, but I think also with Mew continuing to rise in popularity as well, I think I'm going to move it down to tier 1.5. It's a solid deck, can beat a lot of things, can sometimes run into some consistency problems if your opponent hits you with an Iono or a Judge, but it's still really, really good. I personally prefer the Turbo variant with the Peony. I think that's probably the list that you should be playing if you're considering Miraidon. I think the Path version is fine, but I think the just kind of full send Turbo variant is probably the best way to play it as of right now. It would be the variant that I would be playing if I was playing Miraidon to Portland. Moving on here, we're going to go over some of the decks that have been gaining a lot of talk recently. We're going to do Goldango. I think Goldango's a tier 2 deck we saw at the Champions League in, I believe, Kyoto, Japan. Really, really large tournament. The deck got top 4. It won a record of 13-1 before falling in top 4. It's actually a pretty cool deck. You play Palkia V-Star and also the Milotic as well. You might have seen some YouTube videos on this deck recently, and that's the reason as to why. It actually takes a very, very solid Charizard matchup because Charizard doesn't hit very good numbers against it, because Charizard, if they've taken 1 prize, deals 210. That's not enough. If they've taken 2 prizes, they deal 240. That's not enough as well. With Charizard cutting things like Defiance Band and instead playing things like the Glove card and also Vitality Band, you don't hit 260 with those cards. So Goldango just naturally has an advantage against that deck because of the amount of HP that you have. You also have decent matchups against things like Miraidon and also Mew as well. The big problem with this deck is the Gardevoir matchup. The Gardevoir matchup is very, very difficult, along with also the Giratina matchup, which can be a little bit difficult as well. But I think the deck is going to surprise a lot of people, as I think it actually has a lot of potential. If you can dodge things like Gardevoir, Giratina's close, and if you can dodge things like Roaring Moon as well, I think you have potential to do well with the deck. I think the deck is really underrated, and I think it's quite fun as well. Moving on, we got Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon has also been seen success, did very well at the Champions League as well. I believe got top 4. I think got second. Yeah, I got second. Roaring Moon with Darkrai V-Star. I think it's a tier 2 deck. I think its recent performances show that's a tier 2 deck. Don't think it's up to that 1.5 yet. If it gets a top 8, maybe at Portland, maybe it moves up to that. But as of right now, I think it's a tier 2 deck. It's decent, can beat a lot of things, is incredibly consistent as well. What it loses in matchup spread, it gains in consistency. It's just so consistent and does what it needs to do. So we'll put it in tier 2 as of right now. Moving on to Blocklax. This one is always kind of difficult to rate because you never really know if people are going to tech for it or not. I'm just going to put it as a 1.5 deck. I think the deck is decent. It's not tier 1 as of right now. I think if people tech for it, it could bump all the way down to tier 3. But I don't think everyone's going to be teching for it. I think so many people are focused on playing Charizard at the moment just because it's a very, very popular card. I think a lot of people are looking towards playing Charizard. I think that this deck is still flying a little bit under the radar, even though it did super, super well. Multiple getting top 8 at San Antonio, but I still think that people aren't going to respect the deck because it's still going to be a relatively small meta share. So people are going to look at that and be like, oh, Snorlax is only 5% of the meta. I'm just not going to tech for it. And then someone's going to do well with Snorlax because they hit a bunch of people who have not teched against it. This deck might be tier 1 if Giratina has not been doing so well. Giratina has a very, very good control matchup. And that is the problem that control has as of right now, is that matchup is pretty abysmal. If they're smart, they can just sit there with a Giratina V using Abyss Seeking turn after turn after turn. And that becomes very difficult for them. So we'll put Snorlax as a tier 1.5 deck. It's solid right now. Moving on here, we're going to go into Urshifu Inteleon. I think Urshifu Inteleon is a tier 1.5 deck. Has decent matchups against all of the top 3 decks currently in the format. The problem with the deck, though, is that it struggles to things like Roaring Moon, really struggles to decks like Mew VMAX as well. Also really, really struggles to Snorlax. So I think those are the biggest things holding it back. It's a solid deck in general, and I definitely think it makes a solid play for the tournament. We're going to rate both the Mew decks as of right now. I think that Fusion Mew is tier 2 just because its Zard matchup is way worse than DTE Mew. I think DTE Mew is tier 1.5. I think the deck is quite good as of right now. It has a much more manageable Zard matchup because you typically have an extra Judge and also typically 1 to 2 more paths, which is really nice. You just hit Judge path with Box of Disaster on the active Mew against Charizard way more consistently. The only thing holding this deck back, though, is Tomb. You never know when people are going to play Tomb. You can just sometimes lose to random decks because they have Tomb, and that's not fun. So DT Mew still is just fundamentally a very, very good deck, and I think it deserves a spot in tier 1.5. Fusion Mew, the biggest problem with the deck is that it's more inconsistent than DT Mew and also just really struggles to Zard a lot of the time. So that's the reason as to why we have Mew, the Fusion variant, at tier 2 and then DT Mew at tier 1.5. Moving on here. We got ourselves Cloth. I think Cloth's a tier 2 deck. I don't think the deck is that bad. I think I'll put it in between Goldango and also Fusion Mew. Clough has decent matchups against things like Charizard. It can actually beat Giratina. It can, beat things like Miraidon. Actually does really well against Miraidon. Its Gardevoir matchup is really, really difficult. But I think it has some potential, being able to hit super quickly, turn one with like that Hisuian Electrode or the Cloth, you can definitely catch people off guard. Depending on how big Miraidon is, sometimes depends on the success rate of Cloth, because if you are a Cloth player and you hit a bunch of Miraidon, which is still one of the most popular decks, you can just have a very easy tournament. However, if you're not hitting those good matchups like Miraidon, not hitting those Charizards as well, I actually think the Charizard matchup is a better matchup now because they don't play Radiant Zard, so I think you actually have a much better time against Charizard. So if you're not hitting some of those matchups, then the deck can sometimes really struggle, as it is just super matchup based. That's, do you hit the right matchup or not? It's not a deck like Giratina where you kind of can handle every deck in the format. There just are some matchups you can't really handle. So we'll put Cloth at tier 2. Moving on to, I guess, some of the more rogue decks. Garchomp, it's a cool deck. Looks like we got this one as well. We'll put in tier 3, Regidrago, Dialga, just to kind of get these out of the way. I think Zoroark Box is actually kind of interesting. I don't think it's bad. All these decks have some potential. Regigigas as well. We'll put those all down here, and then I'll also put Jolteon and Iron Valiant Xatu as well. So anyways, I'm just going to put those all there. All these decks have some potential. You could, pick up a couple wins with them. You could surprise some people. We might see 1 or 2 of these decks in day 2. I would not be surprised if we saw some people show up and actually, see some success with them. But I'm going to put them there for as of right now. Anyways, moving on, we got Palkia Ice Rider. This just has Palkia, but we'll include Ice Rider as well. I think it's a tier 2 deck. It's been doing quite well. It got top 4 at San Antonio and also got top 4 at the Poland regionals as well a few weeks ago. So yeah, I think it's not bad. I think it's probably behind Roaring Moon and Goldengo as of right now, but I think it's respectable. Can beat a lot of things. Palkia is really consistent. Ice Rider also helps out against things like Miraidon. You still have things like Radiant Greninja as well. You can use Moonlight Shuriken, Concealed Cards, great consistency. It's just a solid deck in general. I like it. Okay, moving on here. We have Chien-Pao. I'm going to put this version of Chien-Pao in tier 2. I think that actually Chien-Pao is much better than people are giving it credit for as of right now. If they just play the cross switcher canceling Cologne build, I think this deck is actually kind of decent as of right now. I think the Iron Hands variant is quite inconsistent, which is the problem with the deck. And I think that this version has a little bit of a better time versus some of the top decks. I think it takes a pretty solid Gardevoir matchup, pretty solid Charizard matchup as well. Charizard's actually one of Chien-Pao's best matchups, especially with no Radiant Zard anymore. And it does take admittedly really shaky matchups against things like Mew and Miraidon and Giratina, but it having, multiple good matchups against some of these top decks is very intriguing as of right now. So if you had to pick between the Iron Hands variant and this variant, I would probably choose this variant. Anyways, moving on here. We're not going to include this Miraidon Regieleki build really into much discussion. I just think that the regular Fluffy version is better, and also I think just the Melodic plus Palkia version is better than Scissor, so put those down there. Moving on to the Lost Box variants. We got Lost Box here with Roaring Moon. I think pretty much all these Lost Box variants are tier 2. I think that Lost Box Kyogre Roaring Moon, just Lost Box Kyogre in general, and also the Lost Box Radiant Zard deck that has been seen play. This deck also plays oftentimes Roaring Moon, or sometimes plays Roaring Moon. I think are all tier 2 decks. I think they're solid as of right now. Decks like Goodra don't see a whole lot of play. I don't think the deck is great as of right now. Things like Star Requiem is really difficult for it to deal with. Turbo Lost Box as well, we can just put at the very bottom of tier 2. I think it's a decent deck, but doesn't necessarily have the greatest of matchups. Not having things like Kyogre can be pretty difficult as well versus some matchups, as Kyogre is just so powerful against things like Mew. But there have been some lists, I believe, in the senior division. Nathan Osterkatz won at San Antonio with a turbo build, I believe. So it has been seen some play in the younger divisions and success like that from what the results have shown. But in the Masters division, I haven't seen necessarily a ton of this. I've been more seeing the Kyogre Roaring Moon and Radiant Charizard build. So we'll put those there. Iron Valiant Entei, I think, is a bottom of tier 2 deck. I don't think the deck is great. I think it's okay. I think I wouldn't say its run was a fluke, because I think that's disrespectful to say to the people that have done well with it. However, I think that the deck's time has kind of started to pass. I think people have kind of moved towards playing Rapid Strike, Urshifu, and Teleon as opposed to playing the Entei Valiant, because I think that Ravishing Urshifu and Teleon just has a little bit better matchups. It's the better damage spread deck. It's a little bit more consistent at times as well. With more players putting Jirachi into their deck as well, Valiant definitely struggles to that also. So I think Valiant's an okay deck. I think we'll move it. I think we'll put it right here. I think that's fine. I don't think the deck is overwhelmingly good as of right now, and I think it's kind of on the downturn. Moving on here, we got ourselves Lost Zone Charizard EX. There's a lot of tier 2 decks as of right now. We'll put Lost Zone Charizard EX and also Evozard in tier 2. I think Pidgeot is just more consistent as of right now. Evozard is still a competent deck, so we'll put it towards the top of tier 2. I think it's just not seeing a whole lot of play because people are playing Pidgeot Zard, but it doesn't mean the deck is bad. The deck has a better Gardevoir matchup than Pidgeot Zard, which is nice. However, you're so reliant on Evo, and sometimes you don't find it turn 1, and then your deck just feels really, really rough. So we'll put it there. The water variant of Roaring Moon, I think, is also tier 2. I actually think we'll move the Darkrai version. This is going to be the Darkrai version, and the water one will be just like the regular water version. I think we'll move this one up above Cloth. Put it right here. I think that's fair to say. I think that the water one is cool, but I really do like the Darkrai as well. I think they're both like very similar. I think that like this Darkrai variant to like Roaring Moon, I think like that little like portion of decks, they're all like super close with each other. But based off the most recent results of the Darkrai variant doing so well in some tournaments, I think that I'm going to give it the respect that it deserves and put it a little bit ahead of those. Chen Pao Iron Hands, I think it's just really inconsistent. I think that the Chen Pao Back's Caliber without Iron Hands is better. I don't know exactly what this is. I think this is just regular Lost Box, but we already have Turbo Lost Box, so we'll just not include that. Iron Valiant Urshifu, I think is just I think it's actually kind of better Entei. I think Urshifu is quite good right now. It hits really good numbers into things like Miraidon, which is really, really good, as I think Entei Valiant struggles to it. So we'll put that there. And then decks like Lugia V-Star, I think, unfortunately, are going to be at the top of tier 3. Its matchups against Miraidon are bad. Its matchups against Gardevoir aren't very good. Its matchups against VMAX are really close. Its matchup against Charizard is just awful, unfortunately, right now. So we'll put those at top of tier 3. And then both the Arceus variants as well will toss into this. And so it doesn't necessarily mean the decks are bad, but just would be decks that I personally won't be considering for the tournament. But I would not be surprised if any of these decks actually made it into day 2, except for maybe this one, and maybe Garchomp as well. But pretty much all these other decks I think have some potential and could definitely surprise people. But anyways, or also like Regidrago. This one's also kind of interesting. I haven't seen very many Regidrago do very well. But anyways, shout out to a brand new Mac as well for making the tier list template. Right down here if you want to go follow them, make sure to do so on X. But anyways, with that being said, if you enjoy the content, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Let me know if you think this list is correct. Let me know if you disagree. Would love to hear that, and let me know if you think I didn't mention any decks that should be mentioned on here. But anyways, with that being said, thanks for all the support as always. This is Smart TCG, and I'll speak with you again soon. Peace out, everyone.